What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video, and today's video is going to be an analysis of Liverpool versus Tottenham in the Premier League today. And if you like the content, if you like the videos I've been putting out, please like and subscribe to the channel. That means an awful lot. You guys have been great about that. So I just wanted to give a shout out there and then get right into it. So I'm going to try and make today's video shorter, clear, to the point, concise. And then I'm going to come out with another video later using Keyframe, and I'll put the link in this video if you want to check it out. It's a cool software to make videos, but let's start right away here. So Tottenham in possession in the midfield third. We're in the first half, it was pretty much all about the midfield third. Both teams looked dangerous in transition, especially Tottenham when Kane would drop deeper. In the second half, Kane was subbed off. Tottenham changed their structure in the offensive phase, and it gave Liverpool much more space in behind and in transition. They left more gaps when they changed their structure to a back four, and it was a back four and a double pivot in the second half. But for the first half, here's how they lined up. So it was a 3-2-4-1, if you want to call it that, against Liverpool's 4-3-3. So Tottenham's build up with the back three gave them passing options from each of the center three corridors, which is important, and it's really important because of the distances between the players. It separated them and gave them stronger circulation across a wider distance, which made it harder for Tottenham to press them effectively. And the double pivot also put more stress on Firmino pressing and the midfielders to having to deal with that. So from here, the press would start from Liverpool when the ball would enter a wide center defender. Then Mane would come from out to in to press the central defender towards the middle, where Firmino would use his cover shadow to block one of the holding midfielders. Salah would be a bit wider, and now oftentimes Thiago, or if Firmino cut off the weak side holding midfielder, Milner would then jump. And this jumping action from the Liverpool midfield, this is when it looked dangerous for Tottenham in possession, because the space, by having Son and Bergwijn between the lines, it narrowed the back four from Liverpool. So the space would either arise between the lines and the half spaces, or if Liverpool's backline was narrow and they jumped a bit more, the space would be in the wide areas with the fullbacks or wingbacks, who would advance in these positions. So then it just became a question of how the ball would arrive here. And Tottenham didn't have established possession as much as Liverpool in the first half, but there was great potential to exploit this. So when Rodon was pressed, the ball would often be played to Dyer, who was giving them support and holding the center of the field as kind of like a deep pivot to switch the ball. But then if Firmino would continue to jump and a holding midfielder was found as a free man, then this is when possession became dangerous for Spurs, because they had the option, a diagonal option into the half space from the center corridor, or they had the wide area option. And same on this side, but on the strong side here, if Milner isn't jumping, the half space would be blocked off and just the wide option. So it was really finding these 2v1 situations and exploiting them and gaining control in these areas. So then often, even if the ball wasn't reached by a holding midfielder, Dyer or one of the central defenders could often play the long diagonal to try and exploit these spaces. Or in transition, Kane would also oftentimes be the one coming deeper to receive the ball between the lines or near the half spaces, with Son running on and advancing, or Bergwijn. But most of the time was Son. But that was in the transition phase, not so much in the offensive phase, although it did happen a little bit. But the main pattern was finding the half space or the wide areas. And then now we can talk about the Liverpool possession phase, which was quite interesting. Their rotations in possession, especially in the first half, against Tottenham's 5-3-2. So here, I'm just changing the formation quickly, trying to speed this video up. So we have Firmino, Mane coming narrow, Salah coming narrow, as they often made these runs between the lines into the half spaces, taking advantage of the central defenders. Robertson, Trent Alexander-Arnold oftentimes played in the wider areas, with Wijnaldum as the pivot, Milner in one half space, and Thiago in the other. So Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold move up the field. So now the consistent piece in Liverpool structure for most of their play was this 2-3 shape, as it mostly is, because there's a very strong space giving them a lot of circulation between the a lot of circulation in the first phase of their build-up, and it's a very strong structure when trying to counter-press and controlling a team's transition phase. So with this as a structure and Tottenham's 5-3-2, oftentimes when Salah and Mane would make these narrow runs towards the center, this would free up Firmino, and he would drift towards one of the half spaces, and if Salah was in behind, then this would give freedom to Firmino to move. But if Salah had not made the run yet, Firmino would pretty much work off Salah and play between the lines in a more central position. And oftentimes, Dyer would step with Salah, and this would leave space in behind for the other narrow runs, which was quite dangerous because of the distance created between each of the center defenders who had not jumped, and it broke their connection. So, as I'm highlighting here, their connection was broken when Dyer would jump. And then a few rotations that Liverpool implemented was, if Firmino had not jumped, Thiago oftentimes would advance into the half space between the lines, Salah would come wide, and Trent Alexander-Arnold would play in a deeper, more central position. And same on the weak side, but Robertson, he mainly stayed into the wide areas. That suits his abilities better. And then Firmino would still have the freedom to move across the line and pin defenders here to try and free up Thiago in the half space. But those were pretty much the main patterns in Liverpool's offensive phase in the first half. So now we're going to get into the second half. I'm going to pause the video so we can switch up the board, and I'll be right back. Okay, everybody, now for the second half, the biggest change was not with anything Liverpool did, it was what Tottenham did. So they made a few changes. Harry Kane had to come off. I think it was because his ankle injury was too much for him, so he had to come off. And then they switched shape. They switched to a back four, two central defenders, and still with the double pivot. But now what this did was the double pivot, Højbjerg and Winks, they often dropped into one of the half spaces, left with a lone pivot, and this gave more freedom for the center backs to progress the ball themselves. But honestly, against Liverpool, this made it much easier for them to press because Salah would use his cover shadow. Firmino would then only have to worry about one player using his cover shadow, and when the ball would be played, circulated, it'd be much easier to press and use the cover shadow, and it really isolated Spurs in possession a lot of times. And the one thing, another big change in possession for Spurs was the players who occupy the space in between the lines. So oftentimes it looked like they were trying to overload the space between the lines. One player would pin the back four with the fullbacks now trying to get higher. So if Winks were to carry the ball, or if this was Højbjerg, if he was carrying the ball forward, now the goal was to free up one of these players between the lines. But the problem became, because there was no double pivot, the central midfielders weren't as demanded to jump into these positions to cover the double pivot, so they were more than happy to use their cover shadows and their spatial orientation to prevent the ball from being played between the lines. So this overload, it might have stretched the space, but the space would still be blocked at the end of the day. So that was the biggest change, and then this led to more space through the half spaces in transition, because when Tottenham would lose the ball, now there was only 3 players, and with Mane, Salah, and Firmino could come deeper and give room for Salah and Mane to run. And then joining the attack, the players behind the ball had the positional advantage because of the use of their cover shadows to then spring forward and launch their attack and score goals. And then obviously Spurs making mistakes defensively, just lack of experience didn't help them at all either. But that was the biggest change at halftime, and we can see, I'll highlight their shape just so everyone gets a really clear picture on the shape that was changed. So there's the double pivot, the 2 defenders, and this was a very flexible shape, but the players between the lines, and this was very fluid as well. So there were situations where each of these players were switched off, and I didn't sub everybody. I just made the subs that were right at halftime for the players who played the most in the second half. But then this could honestly change if Dyer was now in the half space, Rodon was covering, then it could be Winks on the weak side. So this was the change, but pretty much the 3 back line with the single pivot, and even if Ndombele dropped deeper, it still didn't help much because it was only a temporary and the base structure had changed, and with the fullbacks now much higher up the field, it was very tough, and Liverpool took advantage of it quite well. So those were the changes at halftime. That was the second half analysis, and Liverpool ended up winning the game 3-1. So I'm going to post a video using Keyframe, a separate video just to keep them short, and I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope it was shorter this time. The points were more clear and concise and to the point, and there was less time just drawing lines and annotating the videos. But subscribe and like to the channel if you enjoyed it. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next one.